Right, I've been given the nod to crack on with these. So first things first, let's get everything out of them. These shouldn't be wood screws. Corrosion, tape. Right. With the B200, one thing you've got to watch for is these are kind of almost painted in like a PVA glue, and sometimes it can delaminate a bit. You see that in the middle, the dust cap's lifting up and it's starting to do that. It's not the end of the world, but you'll find that quite often with these. So in case you're wondering, this is the SP1063 variant. There's a few variations of this. So there's our crossover. These caps have been replaced, so I will probably still replace these resistors, and then if we need to adjust any of these to get our mid working, that's what we shall do. So one thing I do need to do is a repair around the tweeter cutout. Almost looks like we've got chipboard and then another piece on top, the way this is. So I'm going to try and clean that out from underneath and then glue another piece, a strip along here, and then I can make a gasket, so when that goes back in we should seal. Right, so there's one small piece cut to go in there. I just need to clean it out a little bit and then I can glue that one in. They're going to have to go in quite far for our tweeter to, yeah. Okay, right, get all those in and glued up. So what I'm also doing is I've gone around the edges with some PVA, let that sink right into the gaps. Using good old Gorilla Glue, this stuff sets quickly and it's really good. Also the exposed bits of chipboard, before I do all the sanding, when all this is dry, I'm going to give those a coat of PVA as well, just to stop any bits and pieces flying off all over the place, just to stabilise it really, because it's all flaky and loose. Right, so I am going to glue around the inside again, and you can actually push on this panel and it's moving out. I don't know if I can kind of show it there, probably not showing up, but that's sort of all loose and pushing out. And this side is the same as well. You can see where the glue bond's just completely gone. these sit in like a little, well, the back panel sits in a rebate around the chipboard sides. So yeah, I'm going to soak it in glue again. And also we've got some grip fill around here, so I'll reseal that because the card tube is loose. Just tidy it all up. The other one's basically the same, probably a bit better actually. Right, it is quite difficult to film this as I'm doing it, so I've gone around the inside there, around all the edges with sealant, and also the front baffle I pre-glued this before I went round it with sealant as well, as you probably saw earlier. We've got our side pieces glued in, so once this is all properly gone off, I'll sand all this out nicely. And same with that as well, all round the sides, insides. This has already been done on the front, and also in our mid-range tube as well, inside and out. So yeah, let all that go off, and then I can have a bit of a sandathon and get these looking as they should. Right, so I've started the process of sanding the veneer back on these, and I think they've been waxed because the stuff is just melting and clogging up the sanding discs. So I'm using 120 grit at the moment, which is really a bit more coarse than I'd like to use. I normally do all of this with 240 and then finish with a 320, but yeah, 240 won't even go near this. It just bungs up straight away. So yeah, it's going to be fun. Right, so a hell of a lot of sanding later, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 120 grit papers and a couple of 320s to finish off. Yeah, it's done. So this one is also done. That's had one coat of oil on it. I'm going to get a couple of coats on both of them, and then tomorrow I can spray them, and then we can look at getting them back together and sorting out our crossover issue. A bit more wobbly cam, I'm afraid. Whilst going through the crossovers, I've removed these old wire wound resistors. There's a 15 ohm and a 5 ohm. So I've replaced them with 10 watt metal oxide resistors. These are 5 watt rated. And when I was looking online, I noticed a number of these speakers have very burnt crossovers because these resistors get so damn hot. So they're obviously under power rated, which isn't going to help things. So it was a squeeze getting them in, but yeah, I've replaced those, and hopefully that will help things, because there's evidence of these 15 ohm ones getting quite warm. But yeah, there we go, just another little bit done. Right, I am in the process of trying to sort out the massive dip we had in these speakers, and I'm doing this quite crudely at the moment because there's no point in doing critical measurements until I'm right in the ballpark. So I haven't got any room treatment up or anything like that, and I'm also measuring pretty near. I've done a lot of measuring before I took the woofer out and started mucking around with the crossover with a mic 1 meter away, but I'm currently about a couple of foot away at the moment. But yeah, it just helps with what I'm doing. So sorry, this is all wobbly cam again. What I'm looking at the moment is, so initially I just flipped the polarity on the tweeter because it really looked like a phasing issue. About 3K we had that massive 15 dB dip, so just flipping the polarity gave us this, and this dip rose up 6 or 7 dB, and you know, that's a good sign. We've got this enormous peak in the tweeter, and if I look at the spectral decay, this is ringing out quite a lot, so it's probably surface reflections, edge diffraction. So I need to muck around with that, and it's also just really high in amplitude, so the tweeter is playing really too high right up there. So just looking at the mid-range on its own, let's just check that. So the mid-range is allowed to play fairly low actually, so you know, we're sort of starting our roll off at 750. It's got a first order capacitor on it, And then we sort of roll off about 2.5k upwards. So our tweeter's playing reasonably high. This is where I'm at the moment. So if we go back to all of them, in fact, let's look at this one. So what I've done at the moment is introduced a resistor after the third order filter on the tweeter, and I'm also playing with the cap values, and I'm beginning to lift this out, and it's working quite well. So I'm trying to fold this down whilst lifting this up, so using larger cap values to get the tweeter to play a little bit lower, and then I'll probably, once I get that right, knock it off a bit steeply. But yeah, I'm getting there. I've brought this down quite a bit. So yeah, fingers crossed we're heading in the right direction. So all I'm doing at the moment is we've got a 4 microfarad and a 4 microfarad on the tweeter with an inductor down to ground. So I'm jumping these and adding values to them. If you increase the value, you will allow it to play lower. And also a resistor on the output of the crossover to the tweeter. So yeah, a lot of jumble of wires at the moment, but it's the best way of doing it. I might end up replacing these with polys, which will also bring out a bit more clarity in our tweeter. I might just end up bypassing them with something to kind of speed them up, but yeah, we're getting there. Right, so I've made the adjustments we need to make. So on our tweeter circuit, we had a 4 microfarad cap here, and I've introduced a 4.7 across it. And then we've got the original inductor down to ground, and then we used to have a 4 microfarad here. We've now got a 1.5 and a 2.2, so a poly and an electrolytic, and we're bypassing this electrolytic with this poly. Now the reason I haven't changed these completely just for polys is because the whole tweeter circuit, as well as the mid-range, goes through a 60 microfarad electrolytic cap. So I have bypassed that with a 0.1 microfarad just to pull some clarity through, but whatever you do with this tweeter circuit, and also the impedance kind of affects the tuning frequency of this, so it's all interlinked. It's a very weird way of doing things. And our resistor, there's no room on the board, so that's now in line with our tweeter wires. So it's all gotten very busy, but the results are rather good. Right, I'm pleased to say that these are all finished, and yeah, it's taken a bit of work to get them finished. It took a lot of sanding. I think they were waxed before, and it was just clogging up the sanding discs all the time. So yeah, they were a bit of a nightmare to sand back, but in the end it worked out really well. I think they'd been sanded before, so I had to be a bit careful, but yeah, they've come up really nicely. Really pleased with them. They're quite a dark coloured wood, maybe mahogany. I don't know, but yeah, I like them. And with the new black cover cloths, they're looking pretty sharp. We set them up last night about 4 o'clock, and I think it was about 8 o'clock when we turned them off, and I was really surprised. Very, very good to listen to. I wasn't too sure because of the driver arrangement and the way they were spaced out, or laid out I should say, but with the measurements we now have, I kind of hoped they'd sound good, and they do. We threw everything at them, all the test tracks that I like listening to test various aspects of the speaker, you know, bass performance, male and female vocals, guitars, instrument separation, soundstage width and depth, all sorts of things. They're not shouty, they're not harsh. Really impressed. Yeah, we've obviously done quite a bit of work to integrate the new drivers. All the modifications I did were on the tweeter circuit because the mid already integrated really well with the woofer, so I didn't want to muck around with that. I possibly could have and should have maybe adjusted the top end part of the mid where it meets the tweeter, but in the end it just worked out better to muck around with a tweeter circuit and get that to integrate with the mid, and yeah, it's good. Bit of a strange crossover arrangement because the tweeter also goes through the one of the caps on the mid circuit, which is a bit odd really. So kind of whatever you do to the tweeter circuit can affect the tuning frequency of that cap. So that made it a bit more tricky. I bypassed that 60 microfarad cap, which dictates how low the mid will play. And actually the mid on these is doing quite a bit of work. So I bypassed that with a 0.1 microfarad, and actually listening to it with and without that, there's quite a difference. That really cleans things up, believe it or not. So yeah, they were nice to listen to, really enjoyable. So I'll bring you in closer and we can have a bit of a look. Sorry the footage in this video has been really wobbly cam, but I've had quite a lot to do recently, and it takes a bit of time to set up a camera all the time and, you know, set up your shot, do the work whilst you're talking about it and videoing it, so apologies for that. I've got a couple of my own projects coming up soon, so there'll be a bit more waffling on those. Right, I'll bring you in closer so you can have a look. Right, so the veneer has come out really nicely. I like the colour. It's quite a nice rich red to it, very nice. So yeah, new covers, always put a little pull tag on the bottom. So when I looked at pictures online, I found that they just had some Velcro pads. There were some wooden blocks at the bottom which had been removed previously, so I've put the Velcro there, tidied up this foam a bit as well. But yeah, I think they're looking really nice. So we got a new Audax tweeter here. Actually, I do have the original somewhere that the guy sent me. So these, I think, are the original tweeters. This is apparently an equivalent, but it's not. We had to do quite a bit of work to integrate that, and also these mids are different. So, but the mids have integrated pretty well anyway with the woofer. These roll off with a first order slope to the woofer, and these play reasonably low. I think we're crossing about 600 hertz. So our B200 really is just dealing with the bass, and this is doing quite a bit of work, but they were just enjoyable to listen to. Yeah, odd driver arrangement. To me, really they should be played like that. That would make more sense, mid tweeter, woofers outboard. But yeah, I found no matter where you sat, one of the things I do when I have the speakers set up in the lounge is obviously the middle seat of the sofa is kind of in between the speakers. That's always the sweet spot. But I do listen sitting on the left, sitting on the right, and a lot of speakers fall apart when you do that, but these stay together really nicely actually. And that's how we often sit. I sit on the right, the missus sits on the left, and yeah, we both enjoyed what we were listening to. So yeah, they're good, very pleased with them. So I'm going to give them another coat of oil. We're getting a nice sheen on them now. Got the original binding post cups, still need to clean those actually. Back baffle, back panel is now black. They're all glued together now, so they're a lot more solid. So yeah, very pleased. Cover cloth, they're all redone. So yeah. Anyway, what what I'll do is, here's the original measurements that we took of the speaker. And as you can see, we had that massive dip. Reversing the polarity on the tweeter fixed quite a bit of that. We had a 15-16 dB hole between the mid and the tweeter. Reversing the phase on this lifted us probably 7 dB up, and then it was a case of working with the cap values on the tweeter to meet this. There is still a dip there, but if you've watched my other videos, you'll know that I like that dip. It's at the frequency range where if a speaker's going to be shouty and a bit harsh, that's where it's going to be. So I tend to recess that anyway. And just like I say, listening to these, there was nothing offensive about them at all. They were really, really good. So it's worked well. And I'm hoping, Tim, you're going to enjoy listening to these, because we have. They've been very good. Anyway, oh, one last thing. Every time I post a video where I'm cleaning the rubbers, 9 times out of 10 I get asked what I'm using to treat the suspension, and this is it. I think it's designed for car door rubbers and that sort of thing, but I've used it for donkey's years and it's fantastic stuff. It revives the rubber, keeps it supple, stops it cracking, and it seems to last for ages. So yeah, and there is a noticeable difference when those rubbers are nice and supple and the driver can move properly. Yeah, makes a big difference. Anyway, thanks for watching. Sorry this has been pieced together and I'm rambling on now, but I'll stick all the measurements up and catch you all soon.